it's Jemima Mitra here from Soundsphere. Today I have Harkirit Boparai from Music Venue Trust. He's the Northeast Coordinator for Music Venue Trust. So I'm just going to, first of all, thank you, Harkirit, for spending some time with me today to answer my questions. And first of all, I just want to ask, how are you doing with everything that's going on at the moment?
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's been a strange year for everyone. Even, putting aside our industry. We're like 6 months in now to the pandemic. It's the beginning of October. So all things considered, I think I'm doing okay. I think, hanging in there. I think I've been lucky really to pick up this work with the Music Venue Trust to be able to kind of get behind some of the wider industry actions that are going on around how we respond to the pandemic. So all things considered, I'm doing all right.
Brilliant. So just a bit of background for listeners who might not know, Music Venue Trust is a UK registered charity which acts to protect, secure and improve grassroots music venues. Can you tell me a little bit about your career journey and how you came to work for Music Venue Trust and what exactly your job entails?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I've always been really into music since I was a teenager. Kind of when I was 16, 17, going on 18, I was quite involved with like the rave scene down south. And when I came to university, I was really into electronic music. So I joined like the student society for that. And then we were putting on kind of club nights and things. And that's where I started to get to know more of the people behind the York music scene. And then eventually just found myself putting on gigs again after I'd left uni. I'd been working for charities for a couple of years. So I started working for a small venue in town. Now for the last 3 years, I've been based at the Crescent, which is one of York's kind of last surviving music venues, really. I mean, we could talk about that in a bit more detail later. And as part of what we were doing here, we created a York music venue network. And as we were kind of creating that, I got more involved with the Music Venue Trust. Now, when the pandemic broke out, they kind of put forward a plan of something they were always trying to do, of having regional coordinators who could engage with venues in say a region more deeply, and then refer them to the crisis service that the Music Venue Trust runs when necessary, and help them access grants and respond to kind of local changes like local lockdowns, that sort of thing. So yeah, I've been doing this kind of close to 6 months now. It's been a real journey. I think, hats off to Music Venue Trust for getting the ball rolling on that very quickly. I think the fact that we haven't seen more venues shutting down is almost entirely to the fact that they created a team that were able to respond quickly and kind of fill like a gap, so that they were able to, join in with other sectors of the music industry and advocating at a high level to the Department Culture, Media, Sports, with the Arts Council, so on. And then the coordinators have kind of taken the role of dealing with the, say, venues who are getting threatening letters from their landlords, or, facing, bills that they can't pay and so on, making sure that they can access all the grants and things that were made available for them. And now, as we're kind of shifted away from, there's not as many grants about now, and the pandemic's really worsening, we're now kind of taking more of an advocacy role as well. So dealing with like local media, helping to kind of create noise, as it were, about the issues that music venues and our industry as a whole is facing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a great charity. It's done a lot for this country so far, especially in this pandemic. I think like Music Venue Trust really has been a lifesaver for so many people. So it's great. But
I think like what's really key is what they've been doing, not just over this past, since the pandemic, but for the past kind of 5 years or so since they were created, is changing the conversation about how we view grassroots music venues. Saying that there wouldn't be, your Ed Sheerans or Adeles without the smaller venues for them to hone their craft in. Changing the perception of like culture in this country to say we're just as culturally valid as the Royal Albert Hall or the South Bank Centre or, the Tate. We're just as, we're just an equivalent form of culture, although we've never been viewed as that. So I think they've done an amazing job, even before this, of changing the debate, as it were, about, what is culture and how do we fund it. So, yeah, it's a real honour to be able to work with them throughout this.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got to start somewhere, and grassroots music venues are the place where most local bands finally get that opportunity to perform. But Rishi Sunak recently announced the job support scheme, and this has been quite a controversial scheme because many grassroots venues and theatres have been shut out of the scheme as they weren't deemed viable businesses. What are the implications of this, and how has this scheme affected you personally?
Yeah, so the job support scheme, I think is really, it's quite difficult to unpick because the initial headlines that came out were like, okay, the government's going to pay X amount of a wage bill. Or initially, when he announced it in the Commons, it was like, workers are going to get up to 75% of their wages. Actually, when you break it down, what he's asking businesses to do is to pay more money to their staff for less hours worked, right? So your staff will get, say if they work a third of their hours, they'll get that. Then they're asking the employer to top that up, and then the government tops that up an amount as well. So if I've got someone who's maybe earning £9 or £10 in my venue, I actually, as an employer, effectively end up paying them £15, and the government pays them an extra few quid. Now, on the face of it, if you've got like a kind of job that's maybe got very set hours, you're getting paid a salary or so on, for certain businesses, you can see how that works. The vast majority of businesses in our sector who are reliant on like part-time workers and so on, the maths just do not add up. And effectively, what we're doing is making our wage bill a whole load higher for less hours worked. And that's, they're asking that of a sector that's been particularly hard hit. Many of us can't open at all. And so, yeah, the maths just doesn't add up. And then when he's been pushed on it, he said, well, we only want to fund viable jobs. Now, what we're trying to say is we were viable, we still are viable, just not when there's a global pandemic on, Yeah. People will still come to gigs after this. People will still go to nightclubs after this. People will still plan weddings, like this is affecting the whole industry, events industry as a whole. People are still going to go to festivals and so on. What we're clear about is, we are viable, but if you don't fund us properly right now, a lot of those spaces will shut down, will go bankrupt. And then what we know from track record, from history, is that once a venue goes, it's much harder to get someone in there to open it up again. That space, we think that maybe 90 to 95% of all our members are leasing their property from landlords, That space is always going to be worth more as luxury flats or as a luxury hotel or offices or whatever a developer wants to make it in. So we know then that it's been much difficult to start a venue from scratch, to find the space to do that in and so on. So we're looking at potentially a kind of unprecedented shutting down of venues across the country if the government don't fund us properly. And this is entirely a political choice. This isn't an economic necessity. They could save every venue and theatre in the country for less than the cost of HS2, for less of the cost of the billions of pounds they've wasted on giving the private sector contracts to do failed track and testing or useless PPE, like the list goes on and on and on and on. I mean, if they cancelled Trident, they could furlough us all for another year, So I think we really need to keep the pressure on and try and keep making the case that the economic value, not only that the economic value we generate means that we'd pay that money back and then some as soon as we're able to open within the first year, but also that essentially this is a kind of form of cultural, this is going to end up being a form of cultural selectivity where the grassroots of the cultural sector will be decimated, and all that will be left is culture for people who can afford it.
Yeah, culture for people who can afford it, basically. Yeah, it's a really tough one because a lot of people just feel so helpless at the moment, like it's in the government's hands. But I think, yeah, you're right, we just need to keep putting on that pressure and not give up, because that's kind of what they want from us. They just want us to bow down. But I think a lot of people have got behind the Save Our Venues movement, and hopefully we're going to see some change. So I know one of your passions is DJing as well. And which new releases, singles or albums are you most excited about at the moment?
Yeah, I just went to our local record shop yesterday, picked up a new album from Mild Life, who are an amazing like Australian band who kind of like exist in this weird space between kind of kraut, psych and kind of jazz funk. Yeah, really enjoying that. Also Yaz Ahmed, who's a kind of psychedelic Arabic jazz. She's got a new remix EP out of her latest album, which is really good. Some amazing stuff on there. Like electronic wise, there's a new release on Hessel Audio from a young producer from Manchester, I think she's from, called Anz, A-N-Z. She's got a wicked new release out. So yeah, I do think like there's some amazing music that keeps on pumping out at the moment. Yeah, so it's been actually kind of refreshing because I'm listening to more music, maybe because I've just got more time where I'm sat at my desk now than before, where I'm like running around trying to put a show on here. So yeah, there's so much exciting music coming out at the moment that's kind of soundtracking this disaster of a year for everyone. It's been interesting to see how people like have interpreted some of this, and it's kind of finding its way into the musical output as well, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think alongside the whole pandemic disaster, we're seeing a lot of racial tensions at the moment, but with all those cases of police brutality and the higher death rates for those from BAME backgrounds in the UK. And I was just wondering, as someone from a BAME background yourself, what's it like working in the music industry as a person of colour, and have you experienced like any racial prejudice yourself?
Yeah, I do. I think actually often because I'm putting on gigs and I'll be, or, you know, managing the venue and working in the nighttime industry, you're occasionally, sadly, you know, quite often subjected to kind of drunken racist abuse. I just recently, there was a court case recently from a guy who'd kind of came to our venue in December and he'd spat in my face, called me every name under the sun. Fortunately, he was too stupid to leave before the police got there, and actually that's probably the first time in my life that I've experienced abuse and it's actually gone to court and he's pled guilty. So that was interesting. But yeah, there's that aspect of it, the kind of literal physical abuse you can get. Then I think there's some more kind of subtle things that go on within the music industry. So like where I exist is interesting because I think in the grassroots scene, it's a different beast than from the, say, more industry dominated side of it. So I'd say in our scene, you know, I don't look around me and see when I go to like networking days at the Music Venue Trust or Independent Venue Week or whoever put together, I don't see a lot of other people there who look like me, right? But the people I do meet and speak to there are like, you know, amazing, lovely people. They want to work together collaboratively. They want to. So I think part of the issue is that why don't young people of colour actually want to get involved in that aspect of the industry? You know, I've observed a lot of, say, for example, young student promoters who will maybe do this as a bit of a hobby, but don't view it as like a career choice. And I feel like that could be really worth exploring. Like, why is that the case? You know, for me, I definitely felt that, like, you know, from an Indian family, you know, a lot of my family maybe expected me to become a lawyer, or, you know, I did a degree in politics.
Yeah.
Or something that's more, you know, typically it's like lawyer, in a doctor, accountant, you know. And when I was like, oh yeah, I'm getting involved with running a music venue, they were a bit like, but, you know, that's part of the reason. Part of the reason is, again, because when you look around, you just don't see other people who look like you who are making a success of it. And so we need this a level of mentorship, I think. And part of it is also because it still runs very much like an old boys network. Like, so much of this industry is based on the relationships you cultivate. And that might be with agents, it might be with bands, it might be with other promoters. And it's very, you know, before you can even get a look in, to say, you know, getting involved with a tour of a, you know, a band you're after or whatever, like, it's gone to the same old faces already, the same, you know, the same old faces, the same old spaces. So I feel like part of it is about trying to crack into that network a bit and trying to create more positive discussions and mentors for young people to actually look at this industry and think, this is a career choice for me. You know, it's not just a side hustle. Then within the bigger industry, then there's a whole set of other problems that need to be addressed. I think that, like, the big labels and so on will only engage with, you know, music that they see as urban, perhaps, for example. It's another contentious term. When they think it's going to make them money, you know. And, like, Grime's a really interesting example of this. You know, it was as a scene, like, really maligned, really sidelined, until suddenly there's a couple of stars who are maybe safe enough for the big labels to get behind, and then they get all the attention, and not enough is done to foster the grassroots of it again, you know. And then part of it is, again, to do with the access to things. Like, if you have a label behind you, maybe you can access funding in a way that someone who's, you know, young, BME from a council estate can't do that, because the funding's often quite a ridiculous process. So there's a whole load of structural issues that I think need to be addressed.
It's frozen for a sec. Came back. Well, I'm just going to...
frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's come up, your internet connection is unstable. Yeah, it's funny because I was saying to someone recently, I'm just going to carry on talking till I sound normal, that York is meant to be this like digital city. Like, we're going to get ultra fiber optic now. It's a city, UNESCO city of media arts, and I can't even get fiber optic, and I'm a 5-minute walk from York train station. So hopefully we're remedying that, you know.
Yeah. Well, you're back to normal now, so.
Okay, great. Let's
so do you think Music Venue Trust addresses the issue of intersectionality and racism enough? And if not, what more do you think they can do?
I think that, as a relatively new organisation to some of the big beasts who are involved in the sector, and the big, like, sector bodies that you have, like the Musicians Union, been around a long time, PPS, you know, PRS, PPL, so on, that they're relatively new to this, and they're trying to, say, for example, at the last Venues Day, they asked me to speak about a panel they did, kind of exploring some of these issues. What I'd like to see them do more of is what I kind of talked about in terms of, like, mentorship. And I feel like we're kind of at the beginning of that, in terms of trying to build the network, what's called the Music Venue Alliance, which is the network that's formed of its members. So I'm really hopeful for the future that they can do more around this. Yeah. again, yeah, mentorship for me is the biggest thing. Is you know, it's been so important to me because it's the only way that I've managed to make those connections with people, you know, and sometimes it's even just an email introduction. So I'd like to see a scheme like that, but that also needs funding, and Music Venue Trust aren't a funding body. You know, we don't give grants in the way that Arts Council does, for example. So, yeah, I do think that's going to take a lot of leadership. And something I'd be interested in seeing is trying to network together some of the venue operators who are BME to kind of share our experiences and see what more can be done. Yeah, you know, and actually one of the things I'm actually quite grateful for, you know, for this pandemic is I'm now speaking to so many more operators that we never would have had a conversation with otherwise, you know. People kind of just got on with their own thing. And even within a city, right? You'd say, take a city like Leeds, for example, there's a lot of different venues there. Some of them might view themselves as being in competition with each other. Sometimes they're not talking to each other a lot. And actually now this pandemic, because it's kind of put everyone in the same boat, some of those walls are breaking down. And I'd like us to be able to use this as a time to think about what more can we achieve just from, other than just protecting our venues, saving our venues, stopping ourselves from shutting. How else can we use this time to build those networks? That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good positive, at least, to come out of it all. Like, everyone's getting connected now. You're all in the same boat. So even though it's a bit of a sinking boat, you're all like working together at least. So obviously there is quite a lot of dissatisfaction in the air right now. People are itching for major change. So to you, what album or song is the sound of the revolution?
Yeah. So I actually think back to, even though it's quite a few years old now, it's just so timeless. And I think as a young person, that was my that's what kind of radicalized me in a way to and really made me think that it was maybe the first band that I'd come across that were like that made me think, music is very political, when I was 14 maybe or so. And I didn't think that artists, you know, or music, it was just about having I didn't really think too much about the message behind it. And it's just so overt with them. On a more contemporary sense, I've really been enjoying...
What did you say? Because I think you cut out when you mentioned the actual name. So I got all the afterthoughts on the band, but who did you mention?
I was talking about Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, Rage Against
I didn't hear that. Yeah.
It's just so timeless, you know. Like everything they're saying, it could apply right now. It could have applied 10 years ago. It could have applied 50 years ago. You know. So as like a kid, that was really inspiring to me. So I think for me, that will always be the music that I'd associate with that. But in a more contemporary sense, I think there's been a lot of really powerful stuff that's come out recently. Like there's an artist I really like called Sadafi Kawa, who kind of blends together, like he's from India, but he's lived in the UK now, and his recent album was called More Arriving, and it's really exploring the kind of complexities of identity, of the immigrant experience, and it's kind of it sounds like everything from kind of Indian traditional influences, but kind of interpreted through a lens of jazz, hip hop, and I think he's been putting out really amazing music for a while now. But his work that he's put out this year has been really incredible. Yeah.
Can you give me a song in particular to check out?
Yeah, so he released this tune over lockdown called Turner on a 20, which was actually a response to a review of the album he did, More Arriving. where this reviewer was saying he's complaining about, oh, you know, we're so racist as a society or so on, when actually we've made huge advances. Look, we've got Turner, who is an abolitionist, on a £20 note. You should be grateful. And so he made this tune, Turner on a 20, and kind of filmed it during lockdown, made it during lockdown, and put it out. And kind of the kind of central message of it was like, oh, well, like kind of satirically taking the mick out of this reviewer, saying, oh, well, I don't, you know, everything's better than before. I don't have to worry anymore because I've got this white guy on a £20 note.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It really spoke to me. And yeah, it's really worth checking out. I think he won best album at the AIM Awards.
Okay.
Association of Music Awards as well. But yeah, he is really on point. Really on point.
Brilliant. I'll be checking him out then. So obviously you're the Northeast coordinator. One of the clubs that recently shut, one of the venues, was Welly Club, and that's a club that's quite important to me personally. It's one I grew up going to and stuff. So can you tell us a little bit about what's happening with Welly and if there's anything we can do to help?
Yes. Okay, so now Hull isn't actually in my patch. I share with Chris Sherrington, who's based at the Fulford Arms in York, and he covers Hull. But I did ask him for a quick update. He doesn't want to share too much about what's going on with Welly, but Music Venue Trust are playing a role in finding an operator to come in and kind of take it on as a going concern. Now, there has been some kind of positive developments about that, but I don't want to kind of be too like preemptive. I'd also say that what's really good to see in Hull is that the Polar Bear has been kind of given a lifeline. They're working really hard to kind of fundraise and take on their pub. They've had really positive conversations with the council. I'd encourage anyone to kind of head to the Polar Bears page, donate if they can, and that'll help them kind of secure the building. Yeah, I think in terms of the Welly, where it was owned by a kind of larger operator, VMS, it's a bit more complicated than like an individual going concern. But yeah, we're really positive that there are people out there who see that this is just going to be, we're not going to be in a pandemic forever. This is a temporary thing, and that it was a successful venue beforehand. So I'm hopeful that all the parties involved will be able to find an operator to take it on. Fingers crossed.
Good.
Yeah. But I would say definitely, you know, keep showing your love and support for the Welly, because that's what's going to demonstrate to anyone who wanted to, you know, that's what's going to demonstrate that it's viable, is that people still care about it. People still want to, you know, talk about it and make sure that it just doesn't turn into another set of luxury flats. Because no doubt that's what would happen if it was just, you know, left to the birds.
Yeah, quite a few venues are being bought and saved by city councils. Do you think that's a pattern we're going to see in the next few months?
That's an interesting question. I think I would like to see councils step up and save more music venues. I'd say, unfortunately, that the most councils are seeing an unprecedented strain on their finances that will make it feel risky for them to do so. I would argue that there's massive cultural and economic benefit for them to act in this way. But ultimately, when it comes to ownership of venues, I fully believe that the creative people in charge of venues are the ones who need to own the building. Because otherwise, at some point, you might have an administration at the council now who are looking on you quite favourably. Are you going to have that same administration after the next council election and the next one after?
You just froze. Okay, yeah, I've just missed a little bit of that. So
okay, I'll try and say it again.
Yeah,
I'll try and say it again. So what I want to see is, whilst it's definitely good that councils must step in and save venues, I think that unfortunately most councils, because of the strain on their finances at the moment, and the fact that, let's face it, through government policy, they're being put into a huge deficit at the moment. I think that most of them are going to be very nervous about taking on a venue in that way. I would say that the cultural and economic benefit that will last for years beyond the pandemic is massive. So there's definitely a case to be made for it. But it's a good investment. Personally, though, I want to see not the council owning a venue, but the creative people in charge of it owning the venue, so that they're their own landlords. That's the real way to secure it, because then you're not, you might have an administration, like a council administration, who are looking favourably on you now, but can you guarantee that after the next election they will do that as well? And after the one after that, and after the one after that. So in my eyes, the only way of protecting your venue properly is to own it yourself. So in terms of models to achieve that, things like community share offers are really interesting. And I'd look to a couple of really successful examples, like the Exchange in Bristol, I think, where when they put out a community share offer and said to people, well, you can invest in our venue and, have a say in it, in the way it's run. I think that's a really interesting model that could be a way forward for a lot of spaces. We've seen so much support, and so to give the audience almost a part of really being involved in a community project like that, I think it can be really interesting. Personally, I'd like to see that more as a model. That's not to say that the councils shouldn't be investing in the venues anyway. I just don't necessarily think that they're always the best person to own them.
Yeah, definitely. I can see what you mean by that. So, do you have any good news for us regarding the state of grassroots music venues in the Northeast, and what has given you hope recently?
Okay. Well, I think it's going to be partly depending on when you put this out. So at the moment, there's a lot of venues who've applied for the government's Cultural Recovery Fund. That's being administered by the Arts Council, and venues alongside theatres, galleries, all kind of any cultural institution was, a lot of them were able to apply to that fund. Some weren't, because of like restrictions around the way you're structured and things like that. So on Monday, we'll start to find out the first results of that. That will be an interesting moment. And, just today, we're speaking now on Friday, so Monday will be 5th of October. Just today, the Music Venue Trust created like a Facebook group for just anyone who supports grassroots music venues, whether you're in a band, you're a promoter, you're a venue operator, just in an audience, just someone who likes to go to gigs, to join that group and get involved. So once we've kind of analysed the results of that and we can see what sectors are kind of being well supported, what sectors aren't, what venues have been funded, what venues haven't, I think then we'll move into the next step of our campaign, which is kind of really stepping up our communications to MPs, councils, and so on. So at the moment, we're kind of in a bit of limbo for the next couple of days. But other than that, I'd say what's really positive has been the kind of support that's been created through the Save Our Venues campaign. So people selling merch, people doing online gigs where people can donate, artists pledging to do kind of concerts in much lower capacity venues than they're used to. So for example, the Back to Roots initiative, it's called. It's got artists like the Pet Shop Boys, Metronomy, Katie Tunstall, massive artists doing shows in tiny capacity venues, and everyone can, the way the ticketing works is it's almost like a raffle. You pay a £5 and you're entered a raffle to win the ticket. So either way, it's a win-win, right? You're either supporting a grassroots kind of music venue on the general Save Our Venues campaign, and if you win, you get to see, you know, an amazing artist in a tiny venue where they might have started out their careers, but they haven't been able to play for quite a while now. So I think we're coming up with a lot of interesting initiatives to keep engaging our audiences. And yeah, so I guess just asking people to keep supporting us as we do so, really.
Yeah, definitely. That group looks really promising as well. I joined it. There's like over 1,000 and something like members already, and it's right.
10,000 members now.
How many?
10,000.
10,000. Wow. Okay, that's drastically gone up then.
In the last few, and it's, you know, that was created a few hours ago.
Yeah. That's
so there's a lot of people who really care about their local venue. So I guess what we're going to, you know, ask everyone to do is to just step up their involvement a bit, you know, write to their MP, write to their councillor, you know, if on Monday or, you know, maybe the week after, for some venues, we find out that no venues or not many or just the usual suspects have been supported, then we're really going to be coming to the audience then to ask, you know, please get more involved and state the case for our industry.
Do you have any advice for someone looking to work in the grassroots music venue industry?
Right now, I'd say say you might have a hard time finding a job. Generally speaking, though, right, what I'd say is you can be your own worst enemy, and that what I found a lot of was, and even now I still struggle with this, like you think that maybe a certain band or artist or connecting with a certain person, maybe it's an agent or something, that is a bit beyond you. And you know, maybe you've just put on a couple of gigs before, or you're just trying to put together a tour for your band. And you know, my philosophy increasingly is becoming like, if you don't ask, you won't get. So, and having the confidence to just do that, I think is a big part of it. Finding people around you who are supportive of what you're trying to do, finding like mentors around you who can help you realize your vision. Those are the really important things. Ultimately, I feel like in the grassroots scene, a lot of us have been making it up as we go along, you know, that there's, and as I'm working with like a lot of venues now, I realize that, you know, we're all quite like crazy entrepreneurs, you know, and we're all quite innovative. We're all quite, you know, daring. So I guess just encouraging people to be, more innovative, more daring, and to reach out to people. If you admire like a certain venue or a certain promoter, reach out to them and offer to work with them, because I can almost guarantee that they'll be probably quite receptive to that, like more so than you might think.
Yeah, definitely. So the mounting pressure of those like working in the live music industry right now is undoubtedly like affected quite a lot of people's mental health. And I was just wondering, what are you doing to look out for your mental health in these distressing times?
Yeah. Well, I've got a confession to make, right? Like at the start of lockdown, I went into it and I was like, this is perfect. No more late nights. I can, you know, put my running shoes back on. I'll do a bit of yoga, meditation. And it started off really well until like we kind of started loosening up again. And like a lot of it's gone out the window. I'm eating really badly. You know, so I'm trying to will myself to get back on the looking after myself a bit more. But yeah, I mean, those things I think are great. Just trying to stay active is really important. Trying to not get too isolated. I think that in our industry, especially, we're like very social creatures, you know, we thrive around being in crowds of people, often strangers at a gig. And like losing that has been hard, really hard for a lot of people. But I think that, so the most important thing you can do is just try and make sure you connect with people, you know, and keep talking to your friends and keep trying to find ways of connecting with people, whether it's kind of, you know, over Zoom or, you know, socially distanced in person, whatever. I think the hardest thing about this for a lot of people has been like the loneliness, you know.
Definitely. Yeah. And just before we finish, thank you again for all that you've talked through at the moment. Is there anything you'd like to add or promote just before we finish?
I think we covered a lot of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head now. No, I think just for everyone to keep an eye out for when the Music Venue Trust put out statements, and try and support them. Try and get in touch with your local MP, particularly if you live in a constituency that's held by a Tory MP. You know, it's remarkable how few music venues that there are in the constituencies of the cabinet members.
Mm-hmm.
But there's got to be fans in those constituencies as well. So
yeah.
if if you're traveling from a, say, more rural place to go see a gig, you know, this is important for you as well. So get in touch with your local MP and just write them a letter saying how important it is that, you know, maybe if such and such venue in Hull closes down, where would your next nearest place be? Mm-hmm. You know, if all the venues in Leeds shut down, where would you then have to go? You know, I think that the more we get this kind of issue to the forefront of the agendas, and there'll be some interesting parliamentary debates over the next couple of weeks as well. So yeah, timing is everything. Right now is a time to try and get more involved with this campaign.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Harkirit, for all your time and all your your interesting perspective on it as well. And just to anyone listening, head over to Music Venue Trust's Facebook and Twitter, just so you remember what to do and how you can help. And they've put out a few statements as well that gives you a bit more information about what's going on. So stay hopeful, and thank you again, Harkirit, for your time today.
No problem.
Right, take care.